Yo, what's up guys? On Back of Game of Thrones Season 8, many fans believe that Drogon flew back to Volantis so that he could bring Dany to a Red Priest to raise her from the dead. It's open to interpretation, so if you dig that, that's cool. But I don't buy it. In this video, I'm going to share a hypothesis, because I thought of the idea, then I reread some of the chapters, and now I think that this is going to happen in the books too. I think this is George R. R. Martin's goal. I think that his flight to Volantis and what he does there is going to be the epilogue of the entire series, A Song of Ice and Fire. Alright, let's do this. So, we know for a fact that a piece of a skin changer's soul lives on inside the bonded animal after the skin changer dies. We know this because Varamir Sixskins. He took on the eagle after Orell died, and Varamir could feel Orell inside the eagle. Orell's hate for Jon Snow had been so strong that after skin changing the eagle, Varamir Sixskins found himself hating Jon Snow as well. It's pretty wild. And this one's even better. We got a direct look at the concept of a human living a second life inside the animal. Again, with Varamir Sixskins. It's in the epic prologue to A Dance with Dragons. It's the coolest chapter in the entire story. Check out that video. But the point is, a human can live a second life inside an animal which it bonds. And there's evidence that the same thing happens with dragons. As we went over in the What Really Happened to Dany video, the reason why Jon killed Dany was because Dany had decided that it was her way or the highway. Dany lacked mercy.
We can't hide behind small mercies.
The world we need is a world of mercy. It has to be.
But the silver lining to her arc was that Dany most likely lives on inside Drogon. And Drogon, or Dany, chose to not kill Jon. So she learned a lesson about mercy. Pretty awesome. Team Dany right here. Now let's get to the point. Why did Drogon grab Dany and fly back to Volantis? For one, it's a long flight, so he brought her as a snack. I bet you never heard that one before, right? I just made it up. But stolen jokes aside, I think the question's wrong. We shouldn't be asking, why did Drogon fly back to Volantis? Because Dany lives on inside Drogon. So the real question is, why did Dany fly back to Volantis? Now, I came up with the reason from a storytelling perspective, but guess what? I found 2 clues in the books. I think this is real. I think this is what George is going to do. So here we go. Back in the day, Dany was sold to a Dothraki called Drogo. Dany was sold like a brood mare, a slave. Then Khal Drogo died. The plan was for his blood riders to escort Dany to Vaesdoth Rock to live out her days with the Dosh Khaleen, a widowed Khaleesi. Basically, Dany was still being treated as a slave of sorts, but she broke free of those chains when she hatched the dragons. Dany then went on to free the slaves at Astapor, Yunkai, and Meereen. That was Dany at her best, the mother of dragons, breaker of chains. But then the Harpies attacked, and she had to escape on Drogon. She then came back to Meereen, at least in the show, the books aren't there yet. She came back and she found that the slave masters were back. Slave masters from several cities including Yunkai and Volantis. Why Volantis? Volantis is not located in Slaver's Bay, it's over here. Volantis, the daughter of Valyria. But remember, Volantis is a huge slave city.
Slaves. Yes.
At one point in the books, Tyrion notes that 9 out of every 10 people had slave marks on them, these tattoos.
Flies for dung shovelers, hammers for builders, tears for whores.
And at another point, Tyrion noted that 4 out of every 5 people in Volantis were slaves. And Maester Kendry said 5 out of every 6, so the point is, there are a lot of slaves in Volantis. The slave trade is a big thing there. So the Triarchs of Volantis, they hated Dany. That's the setup, alright? Now, why is Drogon, or rather, why is Dany flying to Volantis? You've got it, right?
Fire and blood.
Dracarys.
Dany has a second chance at life.
You're a dragon.
She's living a second life inside Drogon, just like Varamir lives a second life inside his wolf One Eye. And how is she choosing to spend this second life? By getting back to her roots, flying back to Volantis as the mother of dragons to be a breaker of chains. Not sold yet? That's fine. From a storytelling perspective, it works though, right? Now check this out. 2 clues from the books. So there are several examples where the very last line of a chapter is actually a clue to a major event. That's just how George R. R. Martin rolls. Here are the first three that I could think of. Let's go back in time to Sandor and Arya's journey together. The chapter where Sandor's bringing Arya to the twins, but before they get there, the very final words of that chapter are, quote, "Keep your mouth shut and do as I tell you, and maybe we'll even be in time for your uncle's bloody wedding." And lo and behold, the Red Wedding was a pretty bloody wedding. Literally. George R. R. Martin definitely loves his wordplay. Here are two more examples of that. We go up to the wall, when Bran is crossing to go north of the wall. As they go through the Black Gate, or the door, Bran's on Hodor's back, and Hodor ducks, but he doesn't duck low enough. The door's upper lip brushed softly against the top of Bran's head, and a drop of water fell on him and ran slowly down his nose. It was strangely warm and salty as a tear. Those are the final words of a chapter. They're crossing through a door, and then water drops on Bran, and it's noted to be salty like a tear. That's clearly a nod as to what's to come the next time they pass through a door together. And here's one more for good measure. This happens after Dany locks up her dragons. Quote, "Without dragons, how could she hope to hold Meereen? Much less win back Westeros. I am the blood of the dragon," she thought. "If they are monsters, so am I." Dun dun dun. Eventually, Dany breaks, and she becomes the type of person whom she had been fighting against. She becomes a master, a tyrant. But, like we said earlier, that's not the end of her story, because now she lives a second life inside Drogon. She started off that life by showing Jon mercy, mere moments after he had killed her. So that's a good start. Step number 2, she flies back to Volantis, presumably to break some chains. And here are the 2 clues that suggest that this might happen in the books. The first of the 2 clues happens at the end of the chapter in which Tyrion leaves Volantis and he sails to Meereen, to Dany. The final words of this chapter are the widow of Volantis telling Tyrion to tell Dany, quote, "Give her a message from the slaves of old Volantis." She touched the faded scar upon her wrinkled cheek where her tears had been cut away. "Tell her we are waiting. Tell her to come soon. Dany has a destiny with Volantis." That's clue number 1, but it's not a prophecy. That's just someone who wants Dany to come to Volantis to fight for the slaves. Here's the icing. Clue number 2. There's a red priest in the books named Benero. Benero is basically the Kinvar of the books. He can do some pretty wild stuff with fire, similar to what we saw Melisandre do during the Long Night. And Benero can also read the flames. He can prophesize. Here we go. Here it is. Thousands of slaves and freedmen crowded the temple plaza every night to hear Benero shrieking of bleeding stars and a sword of fire that would cleanse the world. And time again, he preached that Volantis would surely burn if the Triarchs took up arms against the Silver Queen. And that they did. They took up arms against her, but they did that over in Meereen, and Dany never flew to Volantis, at least not until now. So why did Drogon fly to Volantis? Because Dany died, she's living a second life inside Drogon, and now Dany is a figurative fiery sword, Lightbringer. The widow asked Tyrion to tell Dany to come to Volantis for the slaves, and Benero prophesied that if the Triarchs took up arms against her, Volantis would burn. So yeah, the Mother of Dragons is on her way back to break some more chains.
We're going to meet the Savior. You should have told me. Who doesn't want to meet the Savior?
Be a dragon.